So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about deception. And in fact, Deborah was the one that coaxed this concept, transparent deception, out of me over a couple of phone calls. And it's been a little bit of an inspiration. And so let me take you through some of the empirical work that I do. And I'll start with a murderer. This is Mark Twitchell. In 2008, he used a dating site, an online dating site, that probably about 1/3 of you in the room have used, some kind of dating site. It's the way we will meet people in the future. But he used this to pose as a woman to invite and lure men to a garage that he had covered entirely on the inside in plastic. Some of you who have watched Dexter would know that this is called a kill room, and he would invite these guys to a kill room. His idea was that it was to be an inspiration for a movie that blended fiction with real-world things. The first man escaped, the second man he murdered. In around 2000, the CIA intercepted this message amongst many, many other messages, and they gave it to a number of labs throughout the US to try and detect what's going on here in this message. Because most of the time in a chat room, they actually don't say terrorist as their handle. So they have to figure things out. It's a little trickier. I have to go get some glasses before I get incense for the wedding on Thursday. We looked at this amongst all these other messages, and we could not detect this as anything unusual. But here's in fact what this message meant. Glasses refers to the city of Hong Kong, which is the city of glass. Incense refers to Bangkok, which has the largest incense bazaar in the world. Wedding is the code word for bombing, and Thursday is the anchor date. What we have here is a 3-day itinerary of a person traveling to conduct a bombing. Last week, I lied to one of my friends that I was on my way, when in fact I wasn't even close to being on my way. And this is something that we call a butler lie, in which we use media to buffer the number of social interactions that the very media we are using allow us to happen. This idea that we can be contacted 24/7 in many different ways. Well, as my stories here illustrate, it's very easy for us to imagine ways that technology, social media, the networked age, any of those terms you want to use, can facilitate deception. But there are also ways in which we can see evidence of real extreme honesty happening in the online world. And here's but one example. This is from a site called Post Secret, in which people mail to a guy that takes all of these postcards anonymously and posts them on the web every Sunday. It's read by about 2 million people plus each week. And this one says, after I was date raped, I dated and slept with the guy that did it. 3 more times. I hope that if I can make it a real relationship, I wouldn't have to admit to myself that the rape was real. This is a kind of sentiment and statement that we would rarely say to anybody but perhaps our therapist in private. It's difficult to imagine saying this to a friend or even a family member. So here's what we're going to be talking about today is what causes people to go from this sort of ability to lie in any way we want to honesty. And I think our old friend here, Diogenes, has something to tell us about that. Does anybody remember their classical Greek mythology? What was Diogenes searching for? And what happened? He died without finding one. It was tragic. Greek, right? I mean, you got to know where that was coming. And so, right, Diogenes searched everywhere, as you said, for a single honest man. So there's this concern that people ask me about all the time. Are we becoming more dishonest? Doesn't it feel like right now we're a more dishonest generation? Every week seems to bring another deception with a political scandal, etc., etc. I don't know the answer to that. I have a feeling. My feeling is that if Diogenes back in the Greek days was looking for a single honest man, they had the same concerns then. But what I want to do is walk you through some studies that we've been doing in my lab that look at this fact, this idea that lying is a very ancient and pervasive thing that we as humans have done. I'll just give you some quick foundation facts that we'll be working off of. We started talking to each other approximately 60,000 years ago. We've been using words for that long. And Some philosophers have argued that words were invented, basically, to be able to lie. It's not clear, but as I said, the Greeks were concerned with this enough that Diogenes was written down and noted for. At the same time, technology is intercepting every single kind of aspect of our lives, from the plastic that washes up on our shores to the potential architects of the future. What happens when these two intersect? Do we find new kinds of deception, or is it simply old wine in a new bottle? That's what we're going to look at tonight. And before I do that, I should probably tell you a little bit about myself. I'm Canadian. Hopefully you can still hear a little bit of the accent. Most people say no, but hopefully the odd diphthong will slip out. I worked as a customs officer, as many Canadian university students do, and that was my first professional interaction with deception. After that, I went on to do my... Yeah, see, in Canada, it's just all we do is irony and sarcasm. We never lie. When I came to the US, of course, you guys couldn't get irony and sarcasm, so I studied lying. No, I'm just kidding. My wife said, don't tell that joke in America anymore. It never works. After studying or working at Canada Customs, I went to graduate school to study cognitive psychology, where I looked at how people communicate online. And now I'm at Cornell University, where I'm an associate professor and director of a number of things, cognitive science, one, and also the social media lab, where we study things like how media is changing the way our brain works, how we love and die with social media, and deception. We're going to be doing a few exercises today that are going to require you to think about and work with deception. So I want to start with a basic definition of what deception is. It has two key components that I've laid out here. The first and most important is the false belief. When you lie to somebody, you're trying to get somebody else to believe something that you know not to be true. So that's called a false belief. And that's the bedrock. Anytime you're like, but Jeff, is this deception? Ask yourself, did you try and create a false belief in another person? And there is one other really important piece, and that it has to be intentional. So Deborah could have told me, oh, actually, your talk is on the 11th, and I could have showed up really early. But if she really believed that I was to be speaking on the 11th, then that wasn't an intentional creation of false belief. That's a mistake. False belief is also important. That's how we rule out irony and sarcasm. If I were to say to you something like, oh, Jackson Hole sure is an awful place to be, you guys would understand that that's actually not what I was trying to convey to you, that I was being ironic. Okay, so hold those definition pieces in your head as we move forward. We're going to start the talk today by getting you to work on a question. And here it is. Where do you think we lie the most? Do we lie the most face-to-face like we are right now? Do we lie the most on the telephone, in email, or when we instant message people? What I want you to do is just take a second, make a guess. Number E there, by the way, you're going to learn not probably correct. Take a second. Do you think we lie the most as a percentages of all the conversations that we have, face-to-face, phone, instant messaging, or email? How many of you think face-to-face? All right, good. About a quarter of the group. You seem fairly solid on that. Why do you think we lie most face-to-face?
Because they're bound to see you blush, do all the things that will catch you. You're right there in the moment. It's, and so it's real, it's immediate. Versus the phone, it's messaging. You can kind of hide some of that stuff. You can delay the response.
Okay. So do you think we'll lie more in those other media? So face-to-face is where we'll lie the least?
No, I'm sorry. I think face-to-face, in the moment, we may lie the most, just subtly.
Okay, all right.
Right.
Right. So let me work this into the wrinkle there, since you're obviously smart. Imagine that we divide all your conversations into the number of times you lie. So I'm a hermit. I hardly talk to people. I talk once. I lie once. That means 100% of the time, in the times I talked, I lied. Let's say you talk a lot to people. You talk 10 times. You lie once. That's 10%. So we can use the baseline percentage as a way of dealing with that. Who else thought that face-to-face is where we would lie the most? All right. B, why did you think?
Because there's the most pressure to lie when you're right in front of someone. You can't escape from the truth.
Very good. So sometimes I could say, hey, what do you think of my new haircut? and she hates it. But she wants me to feel good because I'm speaking in front of some people, and you would say, "You look great, Jeff." So sometimes we are faced with these choices of, are we going to make somebody feel bad or not? And that happens face-to-face quite frequently. Very good. How many of you think the phone is the place where a line happens the most? Only one person in the whole room? Fantastic. Why do you think phone is the place where people lie the most?
Because we're missing the visual cues.
Right. The visual cues that give away deception, for example. The tells.
The tells are missing, therefore we feel more confident in being able to do it.
Okay.
So when the telemarketer says, this is a good time to talk to you.
No, it's a terrible time. I'm so busy right now. Turn the TV back on. Yes. Good. How many of you think that instant messaging is a place? Okay, a fair number. You feel pretty good. Why do you think that instant messaging is where we lie the most?
Well, again, there are no visual tells and there are no audible tells.
So he does have the audio.
So, I mean, because like I can talk to my mom on the phone and be like, everything's great, Mom. She'd be like, really, what's going on?
Right.
So,
Instant messaging gets rid of the oral cues.
and instant messaging tends to be shorthand as well in terms in modern terminology. So we're not speaking in complete sentences. We're usually not even using an uppercase or punctuation.
Okay. All right, very good. So the oral part is gone and instant messaging there. All right, now how about email? How many people think email is the place? All right, a good chunk. You feel pretty good. Why do you think email is the place where people lie the most?
It's the least personal.
The least personal. Okay, so why is it less personal than the other ones, do you think?
If you're instant messaging, it's someone that you probably
No. Mm-hmm.
and the same thing on the phone, it's the tells.
Right, okay, and the tells. So the email has
Chance to really
craft that message. That's right, craft that lie, because you have time. It's asynchronous. Very good. Well, my lab has done a lot of work over the last decade looking at exactly this question. We've done about 6 experiments that have been replicated a number of places in the US. One just came out in Germany and England. Let me show you the general pattern that we end up seeing. What we do is we get people to record all of their interactions, which is important for that lady's point over there, and all of their lies for 1 week. We divide the number of lies they told by the number of interactions. What we can do is we can plot the percent of lies along the y-axis there, and then we have face-to-face, which has got the most cues, phone, which is reduced cues, instant messaging, no oral or visual cues, but you tend to do it in faster time, and then as you said, the least personal is over here, is email. And this is the...
How do you know that?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Reviewers often ask this, and so we've done a number of studies to show why we think that is. The question is, how do you know if somebody's lying? Basically, you're asking them to be honest about their lying behavior. That just seems crazy. There are 2 answers to that. One is empirical, one is methodological. The methodological one is the most powerful one, which is, I don't care how actual honest you are with me. I assume that you're going to be doing that. But if there is some error, that error is going to be the same for Hugo lying face-to-face, is the same as Hugo phone, is the same as Hugo instant message, is the same Hugo email. So even if you are reducing the amount of lying you're doing, you should do that the same. So that's a methodological thing, works very nicely. But we've also done later studies, which I'll show you in a second, that shows that people are actually, when we can independently determine it for our own sake, that people are very honest to us white coat lab types about how often they lie. We do special things, like for instance, we talk about them like birds. Ornithologists count birds, they don't judge birds. We're going to ask you to count your lies, not judge your lies. So we do a lot of work with that psychologically. And so we feel pretty confident that this is the pattern. And as I've said, there's been about 9 studies total that have found the same general pattern. A single man in the audience, for exactly the wrong reason, got it right. Well done. No, that doesn't matter why, it matters what. So the phone, by far, is the place where liars tend to use deception the most, people in general, okay? And the most surprising thing about this is that email, which we often feel is this deceptive thing, is the least deceptive. And I'm going to actually give you an out there, because you said email, so you're totally wrong. But you were thinking perhaps spam as well, because you said something about this familiarity thing. So what I should have also, if I were being nicer, is said, this is for people that you're interacting with, okay? Not including spam. Yes? That's an excellent question. We're going to get that in just 1 second. What I want to point out to you, though, is a few things, and we're actually going to look at the text messaging very closely. The reason the phone is important is actually because one of the things that Vi told us about, which is this synchronous aspect. It's synchronous, so it causes us to have to be in a place where we need to lie fairly frequently, just like face-to-face. But unlike face-to-face, on the phone I can lie about many things. Right now I can't lie to you about who I'm with, what I'm doing, what I'm wearing, where I am, because I'm physically co-located. As soon as we're not physically co-located, many things can be lied about. So from here over. It turns out that the other thing that's really important is the degree to which things are digitally recorded, essentially whether it becomes text or not. What I want you to do before we get to why everybody was lying the least in email and the most on the phone is to experience deception for yourselves. What I want you to do is this task. I'm going to get you to take out your phone if you have one. If you don't, come on, it's 2011. No, I'm just kidding. If you don't, then I want you to think about the last 24 hours. Everybody else that has a phone, pull it out now. I'm going to get you to look at your last 20 messages. This can happen in two ways. If you're using an iPhone, pick somebody that you interact with fairly frequently. If you're using some other format, just look back through your sent box. I want you to look at your messages. And what I want you to do is identify any time in the last 20 that you lied. Those of you that don't have a mobile device on you, think in the last 24 hours about all the conversations you've had. You're actually in a very dangerous space for lying. You've been interacting with a lot of people at the bottom end of the bulge. The bulge is the degree to which we know people. Most of the people we know a little bit, somewhat, they're acquaintances. There's some people we know really, really well, our wives, our husbands. And then there's many other people that we don't know very well, just a little bit. Those are strangers, much like you've interacted with others. On the ends are the places where we lie the most, surprisingly. So think carefully about where you've lied. Those of you that are looking through your phones, you're looking for any text messages that you've engaged in deception. Text. You can use email if you like. That's totally fine. We've been thinking texting. Email, also interesting, actually. We haven't done that. So we've done 4 studies with text messaging. It'll be interesting to see if you guys come out with around the same as the students. Yes?
Maybe this is a small point, but is there any difference between people emailing on their phone or emailing with a desktop, computer, or laptop?
Not that we've seen so far, but you're right, mobility can be a thing there. Oftentimes with email, generally you'd be located at a PC. Now that's shifting. That's right. Okay, does anybody need more time to look at their texts? Okay. So those of you that are texting, how many of you never lied once in the last 20 messages? How many of you never lied once? Never lied. Okay, good. And how many of you lied one time? Very good, very good. How many of you feel like you lied 2 or more times? Okay, a few. Mark those. Those are the liars in the room. No, I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. It's very good and brave of you to do that. Those of you that were on the 24-hour situation, how many of you feel like you did not lie in the last 24 hours? Okay. All right. And how many of you that are on the 24-hour situation felt that you lied in the last 24 hours? Okay, a few people. So actually, it's working out quite well. It appears that most people in our data, when we get them to get trained on what deception is and how to look for it in their own, they tend to lie 1 to 2 times per day. Okay? In this group, we had 24 hours. It's a bit of an unusual 24 hours, and most of the people here didn't lie in the face-to-face. In the text messaging, it looked like about half of the people lied at least once and a few people twice. We've been finding in text messaging 10%, and this is weird, it's a round number, so we're not usually used to that, but around 10% of the last 4 studies we've done have been deceptive in text messaging. And so it fits somewhere along the realm, but it's difficult to say because it's one of the things that crosses them. But if we look at all these things, we see that there's a few key things that once we go into the digital space, change the way deception works and actually makes it a little bit of a bad place to lie. And it's something that's going to get us towards transparent deception as Deborah called it. The first is, something like email is one of the most recordable media we've ever created in human history. I would argue that if I were to go outside and carve a message to, say, Deborah on the brick of this building, an email to her will last longer, okay? And for a couple of important reasons. One is that I'm using Gmail, and unless we think Gmail is going to fail soon, it's going to be around. But it's also traceable. So a number of IP sniffing softwares will trace every single thing that I send out to me, unless I'm using something very specific, like Tor, which is what WikiLeaks used. Very sophisticated program that hides where my messages are coming from. For most of us, there's a tremendous amount of detail revealed in every single message that we give, including location, time, IP address, organization. Searchable. Unlike the bricks on the outside of this wall, I can search every single message that Deborah sent me and every single one that I sent her. In fact, I can use words that I think I said, applied, brilliance. They might be in any email, and I can use those to search. Very powerful algorithms that are only going to be radically advanced in the next years. And the last is copyable. And in this case, any single lie that anybody tells me, I can copy and send to other people. When we look at most of the cyberbullying cases that take place, they often involve the copying of statements that were said in private. These four things really radically change the way we can go about lying. And unlike the last 60,000 years, where everything we said to each other disappeared as we said them, evanescent, we're moving into an era where almost everything we say and do now is being recorded in this manner that's traceable, searchable, and copyable. Now, we don't only interact with each other and sending messages with each other digitally. By the way, it's over 1 billion a month now in text messages. We also have to self-present to each other. So all of you, thankfully, I think, decided to wear clothes tonight. That was really great. You all made some self-presentation decisions. None of you were required to wear clothing, but you all decided to do that. And in fact, every single conference I've ever been to, everybody has decided to wear clothing. And in the morning, they make this very important choice to actually decide, okay, I'm going to wear this, I'm going to put this on, et cetera, et cetera. Now, those decisions, which were very automatic and developed over tens of thousands of years, are being put online. All of us in this room now, if I were to search you, have some online self-presentation that involved some choices that you or your company or organization made about the way you are going to appear, just like you did this morning when you decided to put those clothes on. We're making choices now that we've never had to make before. You can see here LinkedIn, there's Facebook, online dating. And one of the things that changes when we have to do this instead of wearing the coat is we have to say things about what we are. Now here's a woman that was doing an online dating on Match.com, one of our studies. She had to say a lot of things about herself, things that we could actually go back and verify if we wanted to. So here's somebody that says she's 36 and what race she is and body type and height and all these sort of things that we've never had to do before. We would just walk into a room. Well, the interesting thing there is we can take a look at how the ability to remove our body and put it up onto an online space affects the way we lie. And the way we do this is we had people come into a lab in New York City. We took what they said online, and when they came into the lab, we put them on a scale. We put them up against the wall and got their height. We got their age from their driver's license, and we asked them to give us their income tax forms. Now, what's interesting there is, well, most of those they couldn't lie, but they often, about half of them, did not give us the accurate social security number, so we couldn't look at income. It was quite fascinating. So what we can do is a cross-validation study. And the cross-validation study is really important here because, as Hugo had pointed out before, we were relying on what people were telling us about their deceptive behavior. And here we can actually look at it. What happens when we remove the body from the lie? Well, the first thing we can look at is height. And along this axis here, for women, this is how tall they said they were online on the internet, okay? And along that way is how tall they actually were when we measured them against the wall. The line there, the diagonal line, is the truth line. If their dot falls on that, they were completely accurate in what they said. Below that, you can see they were inaccurate. They were saying they were taller than they actually would. And for the women, they sort of cluster around the truth line, which suggests maybe there's some error, things like that. But the lowest, the dot that's farthest from the line is 3 inches. So that's, pretty good. When we interviewed women, they said, well, I can wear heels, things like that. Now, the men have a much different pattern, don't they? All of those dots are falling below the truth line, which means those guys are all saying they're taller than they actually are. And in fact, it's about 9/10 of an inch on average. It's what we in the lab call strong rounding up. So if you get to 5'8" and 1/10 of an inch, boom, 5'9". It turns out this is really important. Some other people have replicated our work and looked at income and found that it's about $30,000 you need to make per year more for height. So for every inch, you need to make $30,000 more to appear equally attractive online. You can take that for what it is. That came from a fairly large dating service. But why would men lie about their height? Whereas women are acting sort of around that. It's a very, very old evolutionary motivation. That motivation is women are attracted to height because height was associated with the ability to gather resources. The tallest guy could go get the saber-toothed tiger or something like that, and that's the guy that we would go after. In fact, most presidents were the one of the two was the taller man. It's a very old evolutionary motivation there, and men were aware of it and were taking advantage of it. Now, if we look at weight, we see a very different thing here. For women, we can see profile weight moves here, so they were lighter, and you can see that all the women are clustering above that. Almost every single woman that was forced to talk about their weight tended to say that they were lighter than they actually were. And men showed a very different pattern. The heavy guys, yes, they lied and said that they were lighter than they actually were, but the really light guys, the very thin little guys, they actually lied and said they were heavier than they were. So there was some mean that everybody was working towards. Well, why did the women, to almost every single one, say that they were lighter? Again, we can look to very, very old motivations. So men, you can say what you want about us, but they prefer, and they've gone back looking at poetry for the last 500 years, they prefer women with an hourglass figure, and in our time and age, it's a thinner hourglass figure because it's an indicator of, does anybody know, evolutionary psychology? Fertility, that's right. And so we see the exact same deceptions that have been going on for the last several hundred years in online dating, even when we remove the body. Age, we expected here, because of evolutionary psychology, again, men prefer younger women. We expected women to lie about age. There were no differences between men and women. In fact, there was very little lying at all in online dating about age. Does anybody have any idea why that might be? Well, verifiability, that's exactly one of them. When we interviewed people, things like weight, women would say, well, if I get the date, I will diet down to that. But for age, it's verifiable and it's not malleable. Many of our participants said that was a deal breaker, and so people did not lie about that. Now, most of the people that think about online dating think, man, there's just so much deception there. And in fact, there was a lot of deception. But 80% of our participants admitted to lying on one of these dimensions. But most of them were quite small, usually within 5% of their actual height, weight, age, and for the ones that we looked at, income. And the reason for this is you could lie all you want to get to the coffee date, but if you lied too much and were received as a liar, that's all you were getting was the coffee date. It's game over once somebody thinks you're a liar. And this is really important, even when we think about LinkedIn profiles. We just finished a study, it's at a journal now, in which we looked at LinkedIn resumes and traditional resumes that you hand in. Guess which resumes are more honest? Does anybody have any thoughts? Yeah, LinkedIn resumes, it turned out, were more honest for things like responsibilities, skills, and previous job length. Because it's public, and because it's linked to the people that actually know what's going on with you. So the online world can be really a place where more honesty takes place because of, in addition to the 4 things we talked about, publicity, and that idea of being connected. In fact, Facebook profiles, recent study shows we can find out more about a person's personality from Facebook than meeting them for 5 minutes. To me, that's shocking. And I think what's happened is we've hit this space in time where we've been trained for 60,000 years on how to interact with each other. And now we're interacting with each other in these very new spaces. Social media, as we think of it now, is 7, 8, 9 years old. It's not even a generation. We're changing the way we lie, and I think it's making us actually more transparent. I think it's a special time in history. My guess is that over time we get better at lying within this space. But right now, a lot of online stuff is more honest. Now let's pause and switch to another side. I've been looking a lot with you right now about how we lie, how we go about lying. But let's flip it and look at detection of lying. What I want you guys to do is a small experiment. And I know it's getting late, so this is a little interactive, and we'll finish it off, okay? So here's the experiment. You need to choose a partner. So take a second, choose a partner. All right. Now here's the next step in the experiment. You need to determine which of you is wearing the lighter shirt. Now hopefully this doesn't take too long, but it's pretty clear architects wear more black than a typical audience. Now the person with the lighter shirt, I want you to think about a trip that you went on recently. The person with the darker shirt, I need you to close your eyes. Okay? Person with the darker shirt, close your eyes. Remember, I study deception, so if your eyes are open, I will find you. I will come and hunt you down. So keep your eyes closed. Dark shirts, keep your eyes closed. Light shirts, what I want you to do is take a look. Dark shirts, so you've got your eyes, your still eyes are closed. Light shirts are taking a look at what's going on. Okay. Okay, dark shirts, you may open your eyes. Thank you for trusting us with closing your eyes. What we want you to do now is, light shirts, tell your partner about a trip you went on recently. You have 1 minute. Okay, wrap that trip up. The big climax. Now the denouement. All right, excellent. Now dark-colored shirts. You've had it fairly easy so far. The light-colored shirts had to do all the talking. Dark-colored shirts, it's your turn now. You need to decide, you guessed it, whether your partner was lying to you or not. Just think for a second. Okay, are you ready? So what I want you to do is raise your hand and keep it raised if you think your partner was lying to you. Okay, keep it raised. Keep it raised. Excellent. Good, very good. Keep them raised. Keep your hands up, keep your hands up. Here's what the instructions were. So this side of the room, you were lied to. And this side of the room, you were told the truth. You guys are very mean accusers. And you four are correct. Now, what I've found when I've done this is you need to talk it out for about 30 seconds so everybody's okay. So talk it out for 30 seconds. Okay. All right. Now, is everybody okay with everybody? No? Some really upset people. It's very, very unusual, by the way, to have to decide whether somebody's lying face to face. And it's very, very hard to be accused to be lying, and it's very hard to call someone lying, even when it's in the context of something that's an experiment of play. And initially when I did these little experiments, I would keep on going, and people were just like, tense, and I finally realized people need to talk it out. Now, here's what happened if we look at the data here. This side of the room performed extremely well. There were only 3 callous, cold-hearted people on this side of the room that got it wrong, that called their partner a liar. The rest of you were dead right. We're looking at, about 80% probably correct. This side of the room was terrible. You guys sucked. There were 4 people that got it right, and the rest of you were wrong. Here's my question for you. Is this side of the room dumber or worse at detecting than this side? Dumber. They're like, yeah, we're bad. No, I'm just kidding. So this side of the room wrong? This side of the room? No. This side of the room could also be more honest, but I told you to lie. So you could actually be really dishonest and you actually told the truth, which would be a very good play. Yes, sir.
I have to be honest, my partner, I accused him of lying, but he mistook the instructions.
So this side of the room is dumber, I think, is all I can really conclude there. In fact, what happened is you guys just supported the last 45 years of psychological research on deception detection. And that is that we as humans perform effectively at chance, 54% overall. And I'll show you in a second why that is. This group did so well only because they were telling the truth. It's very hard for us humans to call other people liars. And this group did so bad because everybody was lying and hardly anybody called them liars. This is something called the truth bias, which is the single strongest effect in, let me just go through to this, the single strongest effect for deception detection. It's the only thing that gets replicated in every single study. It's so powerful that some philosophers of language have argued that it's the way language works. Without it, without believing that our partner is cooperative, language doesn't work, society is over. So here's a brief primer on deception detection. Some of it's going to feel really wrong because of much of what's out there. There is no single Pinocchio's nose. Okay? If I were to ask you guys, what do you think you rely on when you are trying to decide if someone's deceiving you? What would you say? I think I would have a fairly good guess. What would you say? Something to do with their eyes. What would anybody else have anything else to say? Pardon?
Track record.
Track record. Excellent one. Yes.
Just discrepancies in body language and in the content. Basically, a discrepancy in the content of what they're saying and the manner in which they're articulating.
Okay, so some...
My own information, based on what I've heard from past.
All right, so discrepancies between past or between channels. Okay, good. Yes? Hugo's actually the closest there. And actually, the reason that I think we're in a really special place too, especially for people that are in business and working with others, is you're never going to tell deception face-to-face, online, by any of the things I'm going to tell you about cues today. You will perform at chance, just like everybody else. Well, there's a small part of the population that might be different. You're going to do it by investigation. And we have way more tools now available to us because of recordability, traceability, searchability, copyability. We will investigate just like cops have always done. But let me get back to these cues. We did a study, 67 countries all around the world. Number one cue that every single culture says, eyes. And it turns out, 45 years of deception research, eyes for humans, completely 100% non-predictable. It's crazy, but it turns out blinking matters. We can make people tell lies backwards and they blink more. It turns out that when people are telling really big lies, when the Americans from Wyoming were bringing guns into Canada, which they did, if a car was coming with Wyoming plates or Colorado plates, we would definitely pull them over. I feel bad admitting that here in Wyoming, but... So we have these ideas about cues, and almost all of them are wrong. And actually, they're why it led most people to make the wrong guess about email being the least and phone the most, is because we feel that we can detect other people when they lie. In fact, as a human, we feel like we should be able to do that. Otherwise, we feel really vulnerable. It turns out we can't. In fact, if you try and remember the last time you caught somebody else in a lie from the cues that they told, you'd have a hard time remembering it. Let me just give you the last little bit of this primer on deception detection. As I said, 54% is the average. We're talking hundreds of studies, okay? Some people say it's because there are wizard detectors. These are people that can detect deception. There's about 0.0001% of the population that passes these tests. It's not quite clear that that's the case. There's also transparent liars. My wife, Amy, who had to leave with little Lennox, she can't lie worth beans. It's fantastic. As soon as she starts to lie, she gives out all these things like blushing and everything like that. And it could be that there's just a few transparent liars, and they become clear for us. For a digital world, though, for a transparent deception, it's all about words. We've ignored words forever. We've heard things like words, only 8% of communication matters. We were talking today, I was talking today with somebody about that. It turns out that we've ignored words. It turns out everything now is words. All social media is words. Those terrorists were using words. Presidents, when they engage in false statements, I will say, not necessarily deception, use words. And we've analyzed each of these cases and looked at the deceptive properties of language versus not. Here's one I'm just going to finish with. Hotel reviews. We do reviews for everything now, from doctors to hotels. 87% of people that buy anything worth more than $20 rely on some kind of review. Crazy as it sounds, that's what they do. What we wanted to do is examine how to look at the words that people tell to see if they're fake. Let me just give you a quick thing. So what I do is I look at a message that is truthful, and I categorize the language of it, the patterns. And then we look at deceptive messages, and we say they look like this. And when new messages come in, we want to know, do they look like this, truthful, or like this, deceptive? And we use automated techniques. Here's what we found with hotel reviews. We were able to detect at 90% accuracy whether we had paid somebody to review a fake hotel, or a hotel in Chicago or not. And here's what the New York Times took out of our paper and put it into their graphic. It actually did a nice job at figuring out all the pieces of it. I'm just going to focus on two things. First, when people lie, they think about who and what. They think about narrative. Who were they with? What were they doing? Liars have a really hard time with space, it turns out. So if you were to try and plan a lie about where you were here, it'd be very difficult to talk about where this room was relative to the front office. So the best way to tell if somebody's lying is to ask them, what was the restaurant like? Where was it related to the front desk? Those sort of things. Because liars stumble on those and have a hard time. So what we found was that liars about fake hotels, people that were writing fake hotels and never actually been there, didn't use spatial words very much. Instead, they inserted themselves at high rates into the reviews. So they used things like me and I all the time. It was like they were trying to convince you that they were there by saying me or I. So it turns out that as we, as humans, start to put all of our language online, the fascinating thing is, for me, I can analyze it. Yes, sir?
Why would somebody want to sit there and lie about reviews?
For money.
Get paid?
Yes, absolutely. There are now companies that will farm out these on things like Amazon Mechanical Turk. Very small amounts of money to people all around the world that will write fake reviews with some small instructions. Hotels across the street that are not doing so well will often write negative reviews of others. We don't think that it's a super high amount. In fact, we just have some data coming out that suggests that it's in the 7 or 8% range of all hotel reviews are fake. Because if it gets too high, the whole system is based on trust and it's wiped out. If it gets too low, then the incentive to lie is really high. Yeah, it's a great question. So yes, people get paid to do these things now. So my last point for you is that this is for people that actually went online and typed things out. But even if we just take a fraction of what Hugo talked about in the next 40 years, and I think predicting the future is very risky, so I will do it at high risk, most of what we do and say will be recorded. We're looking at things like Siri in the new iPhone. That is amazing at dictation. Most of what we do and say will be recorded. And for psychologists like myself that use automated techniques to analyze behavior, it's a gold mine. And I think deception will change in the way that Deborah sort of convinced me of on the phone, where it becomes transparent in some other ways. Ways that we can't anticipate right now. As we put all this data online, algorithms will change and radically advance to be able to detect them. That said, Diogenes struggled with it. We as humans now in the 21st century will struggle with it. But I'll leave you with one last thought that has nothing to do with sort of intentional deception, and I don't know how to solve this, and I think it's exactly what Facebook and Google Plus are trying to deal with. I go to the city, I visit a set of friends called A. And Fred ascends B and C, I don't say because, you know, you only have 2 days or 3 days. Friends A later put up on Facebook or Google+, had an awesome time with Jeff, Amy, and Lennox in New York. And friends B and C say, what the hell? Why didn't you contact us? And so there's this new world of transparency that those two companies right now, literally as we speak, are fighting tooth and nail to try and figure out how to deal with. We don't know how to deal with this problem yet. So go out there, lie well, lie carefully, be thoughtful, and thank you very much for your time tonight. I know it's been a long night.